Hey guys, today we're gonna talk a little bit about Reverse 1999's history and development cycle. We're gonna start all the way looking at the very release of Reverse 1999 and at version 1.0, and we're gonna talk our way all the way up to the present, to what is going on right now. We're gonna talk a little bit about every single version, what content was released, what characters were quote-unquote meta at the time, and yeah, a lot of more stuff. We're gonna just dive in, and we're gonna start off with the release of Reverse 1999 and what was going on there. So starting off by talking about version 1.0, we of course had access already to quite a bunch of 6-star characters, including, for example, characters like Centurion, Sotheby, A-Knight, Druvis, Anali, Mrs. Bubble. What was special, so to speak, about version 1.0 was that we had a beginner banner where we could choose ourselves a starter, so to speak. Like in Pokemon you choose Charmander, Swirl or Bulbasaur, right? That was how it was in Reverse 1999 as well. We had a banner where we could use 30 pulls, and then we obtained a character of our choice. The characters that we can choose from were Eternity, Regulus and Lilia. So you're gonna choose who to pull for, and you're gonna obtain this character. And this character was very strong. Those three were among the best characters in the game, or were even in fact the best characters in the entire game. And that's how you started to not really build a team. Team building was not really a thing. Of course, a little bit. You put your character that you choose to begin with as your main DPS. That is the character that will do the most amount of work when it comes to carrying you through the main story. And you're just gonna put characters into a team, quote unquote, with whatever character you started out for. Now it depends a little bit. We had an A-Knight banner, and I think there was a banner that also featured Centurion. If you pulled for one of these characters, which you should not have, then you just put them into a team with whatever character you started out for. You play Eternity with A-Knight or Centurion, for example. And then you used whatever healer you had available for you at the time. There were not many healers. The prime example here would be La Source. That was a character that we obtained for free, and after playing the game for 1 week, we obtained another pretty good sustain at the time with DK. She also has a heal, and that was very useful at the time. But there were not many characters in this game that actually provided heal, and that's why Eternity was the best character to start with, because she has her own heal attached. You see this attack here enjoys 50% leech rate, and it hits all enemies. So Eternity was a character that could very well sustain herself. She was also not on a squishy side, like for example a character like Lilia would have been. So Eternity, especially also if we fast forward to today, was the best starter you could have. A lot of people, of course, made arguments for Lilia because, Monkey see damage, Monkey thinks, wow, Lilia crits a lot, but they don't take anything other in account, like the lack of a healer in this game and the sustain that you need to have. They only look at damage, and therefore they fall for Lilia. This is a principle that follows us to this very day, actually. You know how it goes. History repeats itself. And some things will just never change, no matter what. And then, you did go ahead. You pulled for your starter, you choose Eternity, Regulus or Lilia. You put in Sonetto there, you used whatever could heal, right? You used the other characters that the quests here tell you to update. It tells you level up a beast character, level up a plant character. We used the Lelani, Eagle, whatever we had available at the time, just as it is, by the way. If you start the game right now, you still go through pretty much the same process. The only difference is, of course, the banner that you start the game out with. Then you did go ahead, you cleared the main story as much as you possibly could have. Our endgame at the time, at the very first version at release, was still limbo. Here you have to have 2 teams, you're gonna clear everything, and this was actually a very good endgame, because this endgame is rewarding. You have to clear this, you have to get to a point as fast as you possibly can to clear the limbo. Every time it resets, you want to clear it fully, because it gives you very, very important resources like clear drops. Those are the unilogs that you need to pull for characters, and it was really an incentive to actually clear the endgame content. We of course know that fast forward to today, that is no longer the case anymore. We don't have any endgame content that has any incentive. Our endgame content are the voyages of volatility. I know many people believe the dive to be the actual endgame content in this game, which is obviously not true. The dive is just for fun if you want to put a little bit of a challenge onto yourself, but just for the fun of it. There's no reward attached to the reveries, for the dive at least, at all. The true rewards lie in the voyages of volatility. That is what you want to clear as fast as possible, because those reward you with the keys that you need to upgrade your euphoria. That is the incentive. That is what you have to be able to clear and get there as fast as possible, as this is an incentive. I can show you that the voyages give you way more than enough keys than you would actually need. I have all the euphoria upgrades that are needed in this game already upgraded, and I'm sitting on 82 keys, you know. Also, another very, very important thing is that the voyages, they reset from time to time. Endgame content and every single gacha game in existence resets at some point. You can't call something endgame content that you clear just once in your lifetime and then never ever again, you know. That is just a one-time thing, is not content, you know. And you might already realize that the point where the reveries are introduced and the UTTU was taken away from us, that is really a breaking point where this game like truly got worse. You will see as we go down the timeline, there are other small breaking points that make the game already worse, but taking away rewarding endgame content and make it really a piece of cake and there's no challenge attached to it, that really makes the game significantly worse now than it ever was before. You need an endgame that is rewarding. You need an incentive to take a challenge, you know what I mean? But if you, after 2 years of this game's existence, and even right now with Blood Tide and Dynamo introduced, those teams are so incredibly strong, and they clear the content in the voyages every single stage, no matter what stages you go forever. They clear this in like 2 or 3 turns. That is not gameplay. That is not being a video game. That is just ass and maintaining a account simulator. But we don't actually play a video game, right? That is my concern with this game for a really long time now, and it has to change quite soon. So don't make the mistake listening to people who try to tell you otherwise and like force you, put you into the dive because they make you believe this is the content that you would have to clear, and if you can't, then you will be left behind or you're not good, right? Complete utter nonsense. Also this thing of, oh, we need 5 different teams. Yeah, you should, right? Otherwise the game would become a little bit stale and boring. But then again, you don't need that. All you need is 2 teams, good teams, to clear the voyages. And that's about it. On release, there's already this extremely good example with rewarding endgame content. That is what a game needs and that we don't have today. Alright, but enough about that. Let's move on and take a little bit of a look into version 1.1 and see what characters we got there and how they changed things up. We got the characters Melania, Pickles and Diggers. And here's already something very, very important to notice. It's like the first hint that will lead you towards understanding how the developers go about developing this game. There are multiple things that you will notice if you looked, right? If you read the kits from these characters, from Melania, Pickles and Diggers, then you will easily see that Pickles and Diggers are already complete trash and must skips. No question about that whatsoever. You can simply look at these characters and compare them what we already have in the game, and they offer nothing special and are very, very bad. Then Melania was the interesting character in this game, in this version 1.1, because she is another 6-star main DPS character for that matter. And that is very, very interesting because you would probably, or it's very likely that you wanted or even needed another 6-star character that can deal damage, because our options were very, very limited. Our resources that we can use to pull were quite limited back in the day. So you really had to make a decision there. And now we hit the 2 big reasons that tells us why Reverse 1999 is so extremely free-to-play friendly. You can already notice, if you compare stuff with each other, that Reverse 1999 first of all doesn't have a weapon banner. That is a huge advantage. Most gacha games, even the most popular gacha games in existence, they have weapon banners. And what these weapon banners lead to is that whenever there would be a version where characters are actually skippable, then you would go and think, hey, I save up the resources because I will skip this character. So I can use these resources that I save up by not pulling for the character to go for a weapon for an already existing character to then make my lineup stronger in this version, even though I don't pull for the character, right? It's a psychological trick that people fall for this non-stop, okay? And that's how they trick you into not saving up resources and therefore spend money into the very game that you play. Reverse 1999 is already extremely different when it comes to that. Like, if you play Reverse 1999, right, ask yourself the question and be honest about it. Imagine next version, right, they would tell you like, hey, you will have to pull for Psycubes right now, and there will be a separate banner for those Psycubes, and to obtain the Psycube of your choosing, you would have a 50-50% chance. It is exactly the same way as you would pull for a character. If you being honest to yourself, that would be an absolute no-go. You would be seriously considering to uninstall the game, right? But in other games, people put up with this bullshit. So this is one big reason why Reverse1999 is super free-to-play friendly. And you will see, if we go throughout the history and check every single version, that it is always the case. There's, like right now, right? Version 1.1, that's a must skip of all characters. Melania doesn't stand out, doesn't stick out compared to every other 6-star character. She's just mediocre, she just fits in, she's nothing special at all. So therefore, it is really a must skip unless you are like stuck or greedy or you can't help yourself, right? But objectively speaking, this patch is a whole skip. And this will, you will see, repeat itself constantly for a very, very, very long time, even to this day. There's one version that you skip and that you save up your resources, everything that you get, right? The next version, they will hit you with a must pull. Next version is a skip. Next version is a must pull. You will see that this is a thing here in this game that will constantly repeat itself. So let's draw a conclusion here. I talked way too much already, but yeah, considering version 1.1, there was no breakthrough when it comes to the metagame. You skipped all of these characters if you have understanding and a brain and you know how characters work and how they will perform by reading their kits, right? Okay, now let's move on to version 1.2. Here in version 1.2, things changed a little bit when it comes to team building, quote unquote. Let me talk first about the event store and how this will go for a very, very long time. A new version releases, we got the new main story, we got a character story, and every single version we will have a unique event, something that we have never seen before. This is how they keep the game, or try at least, to keep the game fresh and have something brand new every single version. In version 1.1 we had to go through some dialogue and prevent something from being stolen from us. In this version we go to school with Jessica. I mean, everyone knows about this right now. It's an absolute nightmare. Very fitting to what this version is called. It's called Nightmare at Green Lake. Going to school with Jessica is the biggest nightmare that Reverse1999 ever introduced to this day. Okay, just wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Now we can talk about the characters Tooth Fairy, Jessica, Blondie, and Horrorpedia, spoiler alert, is completely irrelevant garbage. But Tooth Fairy was a must pull. As I already told you, that there are not many characters to begin with that heal, that sustain our team in a respectable manner. And Tooth Fairy like broke the ceiling by in a crazy amount. This was by far the best healer in the game. Nothing was even close, and this will be the case for a very, very long time to come. So Tooth Fairy was an absolute must pull. And see, version 1.1 was a skip. Now version 1.2 is a must pull. And you can already tell right now what version 1.3 will be, but more to that later. So of course you pull for Tooth Fairy. Then we have another character introduced with Jessica, which is very, very interesting because Jessica is another character that evolves around poison. We already have Sotheby in this game, that is the only character that provides poison. Now we have Jessica who poisons, right? You can see the trend of them introducing more and more characters, expanding on what they already have, so that we like move into a meta that makes us build actual teams. But keep in mind, this will take such a long time. It's like over a year from now, I think, or like almost a year until the actual poison team exists. you know. So Reverse 1999 is like snails. If we look at how fast a snail moves, that is light speed compared to how fast or slow, for that matter, Reverse 1999 develops. It's absolutely incredible. These versions are 6 weeks long, and just as it is right now with our 4 weeks version, the whole version is pretty much a content draw. There's no content, there's nothing to play. It's barely even a video game. So keep that in mind when I refer to Jessica being a future investment, or at least it looked like this at the time, into developing like a team, like the Poison team, right? Take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, because this will take a year. Okay, so future investment is really stretching like everything here. Okay, cool. So now we have two fairy, and the character Blonny exists. So if you look at Blonny's kit, then you will realize, hey, Blonny deals pretty good amount of damage. Even like she's a 5-star, but being a 5-star is not too much of a big deal just yet, right? This is the second version that released, so being a 5-star is actually fine. And if you look at Blonny, then you will realize she's all about critting the opponent and dealing a lot of damage to the opponent. By being able to crit, her attacks have increased critical hit rate. And 2 fairy, she has a debuff incantation that inflicts a debuff onto the enemy. Who would have guessed? That reduces the critical resistance of that enemy, which means if you attack this enemy with Blonny, not only does Blonny have a respectable crit rate applied to her incantations, to her attacks, no, 2 fairy makes her even more likely to crit. So if your starter wasn't Lilia, then you can take advantage of having Blonny right now. Like for me, for my example, I of course picked Eternity as my starter. So, but I need 2 teams to be able to clear the limbo, which in version 1.2 you should be there, right? You should be like pretty much be honestly able to clear the limbo from this point onwards every single time it resets. And you can use Blonny and 2 fairy together in a team. 2 fairy will sustain his team and Blonny will deal the damage, and then you add a support like whatever, like Regulus or another DPS into this team, because Blonny is only a 5-star, you know how that goes. And my other team will then be Eternity, who doesn't need that good of a sustain character. She doesn't necessarily need 2 fairy in her team, because as I explained earlier, Eternity is very, very good at sustaining herself. She doesn't need too much help sustaining herself. So I used Eternity, Le Source, and whatever it was, Soneto, and then my second team was like Blonny, 2 fairy, and whatever other character it was at the time. I slotted something in that was good for the stage, right? If I needed a plenty PS, I used Lilani and that kind of jazz, right? Adjusting to what content you actually face, but having a core as a team, the quote-unquote team, that of course helped. And this was how 2 fairy changed the complete metagame as the by far best healer / sustain character in the entire game, who already also had synergy with other characters that like to crit, like Blonny and Lilia. And Jessica was, yeah, this future investment, right, that we talked about, by having good synergy with the character Sotheby. If you had Sotheby, you pulled for Jessica, that was kind of a given. But you could skip everything here except for 2 fairy. And that's about it for version 1.2. Let's go and take a look at version 1.3. And here we go, version 1.3. That is, as I already explained, is a must-skip version. We know all about the tragedy that is Shamani, right? We know that Kanjira is not it, but Kanjira here is at least interesting, because remember, We have Sotheby, we just got Jessica, both apply poison. Now Kanjira also applies poison, and back then we only needed to create a team out of 3 characters. The 4th character was so-called assist that acts as a substitute. In case one of your characters would go down, then the substitute takes place, right? It is still the same story today when we look at the main story chapters. And some other content even, right? You know how this goes. So, you see, there is a new team here coming into fruition with Jessica, Sotheby and Kanjira all being able to spread poison. Cool. Then Kalabauna and Shamani, yeah, we all know about how tragically bad these characters are, unfortunately, so they were must skips. And that is truly already all there is to say about this version, right? It's a pure skip. Kanjira is the most interesting character here for the poison lineup with Jessica and Sotheby. And that's about it. Then we have events, like it always is. We have character stories, the main story, and yeah, nothing standing out here, nothing really worth mentioning. So let's already keep moving on. Then we have version 1.4, which is a gigantic one. We have here the gameplay mode Main's Bulletin introduced, which we thought at the time would be the new endgame, which is of course not the case. That is just a place to flex for the whales and show off their inflated numbers to impress like people that don't cash, right? You know how this goes. It explains itself at this point. Then we have the new endgame content, which is called UTTU. They unfortunately at some point took this away from us, but it will make a return in version 3.0. So if you don't know what UTTU is, stay tuned. That is one of the most fun gameplay modes that Reverse ever had, and that was our endgame content at the time in version 1.4. So 2 pretty huge, at least at the time, new gameplay modes introduced. Then, for the very first time ever, we have 2 characters here that are 100% must pulls. We have the character 37, who is the best main DPS character in the entire game at that point in time, and we have the best support in the entire game with the character 6 at the time. So you can see, right, that what I just told you, it is proven to be correct at this point. If you pulled for Melania, if you pulled for Kalabauna, you wasted your resources, because both of these characters will now be replaced by 37 anyways. You know what I mean? You need 2 teams for the limbo. One team will use your starter as the main DPS, and your other team will use 37 as their main DPS. Now, since we got a healer introduced with 2 fairy, right? We haven't gotten a support yet. There we have him with 6, so he fills a slot. 1 support slot is most likely be filled by Sonetto, if not another DPS character, and you play a team with 2 DPS characters. Many possibilities back then, because team building didn't really exist at the time. So very likely you played Sonetto in one team as your support, and the other team will now have the character 6 as a support in their team. And then you have your sustain characters with DK and who was it? DK and 2 fairy, of course. Those were your sustain characters. Maybe you played the poison lineup with Sotheby, boom, right? This would even be a 3rd possible team right then and there. And yeah, this is how this version did go. 2 must pull characters for the very first time ever, because the previous version was a whole skip. Then we have 2 gigantic new gameplay modes, at least that's what we thought at the time, and UTTU turned out to be like a huge gameplay mode. It was a huge part of actually enjoying this game, and it was much needed content as well. But at the time, Main's Bulletin was also pretty hype. That was like what we thought would be like a boss rush mode, right? Yeah, didn't quite turn out like that as we know right now, but at the time that was pretty sick. And that's about it for version 1.4, absolutely gigantic version. But now let's move on to version 1.5. Alright, let's jump into version 1.5, and first of all, this one has a special place in my heart because this was the version where I truly fell in love with the music in this game. By the way, throughout time, right, even to this day, they keep busting out bangers from time to time. Absolutely fantastic music in this game, it's incredible. But you know, let me repeat myself one more time. What did we have last version? We had must pull, right? Must pull characters. So you know how this goes. If you have a must pull character, next version is a skip version. And look at this. In this version we got Ezra, Spathodea, Ulu and Desert Flanner. You know how absolutely ridiculously shitty these characters are, right? It is very refreshing to be able to talk about characters like that, because nowadays every single version that releases, people are and give me shit for saying that the character, that you should skip the character. People outrage and witch hunt me for this, and I keep shitting into their mouths by proving them wrong, right? That's why it's actually very nice to make a video going over the history, because here there is no discussion to be had. You know that I'm 100% correct with what I'm saying. There is not a possibility to deny this anymore, you know? That is very good. People still talk about this useless trash Ezio dog shit. But give them a few more versions and they will realize that Ezio is already completely irrelevant and nothing worth talking about. But I mean, you see what I mean with history repeats itself and some things will never change. It is exactly showcased here. But yeah, last version we had must pull characters, now we have must skip characters. And that's really all there is to say about this version. It is just pretty much irrelevant, but gave us a banger song, so we take it. And yeah, let's already move on to version 1.6. That's a half-year anniversary, and here something drastically changed. Two things in fact. First of all, we do get less clear drops from clearing the story. So the resources that we have available, they drop. We have less resources available, less resources to pull for characters. And this is the very first time ever that they throw a bait banner onto us. You can choose 2 6-star characters from the past to then have them rate up and pull for them, right? We noticed today with many banners. We have one bait banner after another just thrown into our faces, and here it happens for the very first time ever. Then we have 3 new characters with Jiu, Getian and Jenisei. Last version was a must skip, this version you have a must pull with Jiu, and even Getian was at the time nothing to underestimate, but yeah, also nothing special. You should have skipped Getian in this version. Then Jenisei, we all know, especially new players know how good of a 5-star Jenisei is. She's obtainable for just $1, so that really helps out here. And yeah, that's it about this version. The game gets worse here, arguably, because we have less resources available and we now get hit with bait banners. So that's it for version 1.6. Let's move. Alright, off we go into version 1.7. Here we are introduced to the character Carcania. We cannot pull for Carcania yet. That is just to build hype for the character so that we pull for her later when she releases. They know what they are doing, and they did a fantastic job in my opinion here with this, because this is like one of, if for me personally, it is the best part of the entire story here with Isolde and Marcus. So as you know, the half year anniversary just happened. We had a must pull character, so of course we're heading into a version that is a must skip, and here we are. We know, everyone knows, Isolde is unplayable garbage. We know how this whole burn fiasco turned out, no question about that anymore. Marcus also pretty terrible garbage, but at least for Marcus there was something interesting about her, because she was the first like true main DPS from the plant afflators. That makes her interesting. We still suffer from this problem to this very day. There are just not many main DPS characters from the plant afflators that are like truly viable. You know, look, who do we have? Willow, kinda rough on the edges by now. Then we have Noah, kinda rough on the edges, you know what I mean. And then we have Marcus, you know, with her Euphoria update right now, who's like the only truly really good main DPS for the plant afflator. And that's it, right? And this is exactly how it was back in the day with her as well. Back in the day though, she was still really really bad and like a must skip. Or honest, obviously, right? You know how this goes, why this game is free to play friendly in the first place, because we are able to actually skip characters and save up resources if we have a singular half brain cell. So yeah, but at least, right, plant main thingy, you know, we didn't have that. So there we go. Then yeah, they throw another bait banner onto us with Yearning of the Water, and yeah, that's pretty much it. This story was, at least in my opinion here, absolutely fantastic. Right, then heading into version 1.7, which has one of the best songs Reverse1999 ever made. And yeah, this is of course something that we recently talked about, because this is a version right before a true anniversary, right before the first anniversary, and how it is in every single gacha game in existence, that right before a true anniversary they hit you with things that are pretty good, because they want you to spend the resources on the things that are pretty good, so that you basically waste your resources by getting baited by something that is very very good, so that you don't have any resources anymore, or not enough, to be able to get your hands onto the gigantic power spike that hits at the very anniversary. And then you have to spend money, because you cannot not get your hands on a massive power spike. I just talked about this a whole bunch and got witch hunted for it when it came to the second anniversary, right? So I will keep it at that. Now, Windsong is of course a much better, like multiple universes are between how good Windsong was at the time and what Ezio is right now, you know? Windsong is not necessarily a 100% must skip no matter what, like Ezio was. Windsong is, yeah, of course, at the time was the best main DPS in the entire game. Only the first anniversary, of course, outclasses Windsong then. But since we need two teams and Windsong was so incredibly strong, you could make a strong argument to pulling for Windsong. Of course, you still should have not done that, no matter how good Windsong was, because she is from the Star Afflators, and so is 37. You pulled for 37. Probably, most likely, even got portraits for 37 as well. You don't need Windsong, no matter how you look at it and no matter how you spin it. so it was a should skip. Then, but it is still a very, very good bait, because Windsong was very, very good. Other than Ezio, Ezio is complete unplayable garbage, completely irrelevant, and people still pulled for this guy. Even P5'd him, you know what I mean? But yeah, Windsong was on a whole nother level back then, but still was a skip. You don't need Windsong, right? Because 37 exists and is good enough. And then you have to, of course, keep your resources for the first anniversary. People will never get it, but I will say it every time I have to. Then Via is another very, very good bait, because she's another very good sustain character. She's the second best sustain character in the entire game, next to Tooth Fairy. So getting her is also pretty tempting, right? One team uses Tooth Fairy, the other uses Via. Sounds good to me, but guess what? Absolutely unnecessary. We have other sustain characters, like even DK gets the job done. We had Jenny-say, right? A free 5-star character, gets the job done. No need for Via, who is so specific in terms of you have to play her together with characters that deal mental damage. Everyone and their mom back then dealt reality damage and not mental damage. So, you know, there you go. Also a easy skip, but I can see how these characters are, of course, tempting, right? That is what the developers are going for. This is the psychological trap that they set to people, and the people step willingly into this with full confidence and think they are right, you know. It is what it is, and yeah, that's it about version 1.7. Alright, then let's move into version 1.9, which was our first anniversary, and this is of course the biggest thing we talked about yet. We got a banner for Lucy, a banner for Kakania, then we got Semmelweis for free, and the character Lorelei was introduced. And of course, both characters, Lucy and Kakania, are almost must pulls. Now hear me out. Lucy is of course the true must pull. That is the character that you should have saved up for to at least get some portraits for her. This is how it always goes with characters that are anniversary main DPS limiteds. It is the same story that we have with Nautica. Lucy completely annihilated everything and trivialized content. It was by far the best character in the game. We know even now that she stood viable as one of the best characters in the entire game all the way to our second anniversary, the entire year. And now, even right now, after or in the second anniversary, she is the second best main DPS in the entire game, next to the new main DPS that got released, that is limited in the second anniversary Nautica. This is how important main DPS characters at anniversaries are, right? We just did go over this much detail. Everyone who didn't pull for Nautica, everyone who does not have portraits for Nautica, big fucking mistake. I was telling you this for like 6 months, or if not even more. So, you know, to each their own, and here we are. Then Kakania is, of course, in theory, also an absolute must pull. That is such a good character. That was also one of the best characters in the entire game. You could argue this is the second best character in the entire game at the first anniversary. Completely busted, best sustain, right? Has this unique ability that she can take damage away from her team, take it for herself, and then heal herself. Fatutu does this much better nowadays. She has a complete team-wide damage spread, which is why she is by far the best sustain character in the game. Nothing comes even close. So there you go. But Kakania was, like just as Muldir is right now, was still skippable, because you could decide, you could make the decision that, hey, Tooth Fairy and maybe Via or even Genisei are like good enough. I don't need another sustain character, and I skip Carcania to save the resources and put them into portraits for Lucy. That was definitely a possible route, but yeah, fast forward. You should have still gotten some portraits for Lucy, but you also should have made sure that you obtained yourself Carcania, because these two characters absolutely dominated the game for, in case of Carcania, for quite a while, very long time, super worth it, and Lucy to this day. And there you go. Then we got Semmelweis. Whoa, she will build, like, if I'm not mistaken, the very first true team in this game. I'm not too entirely sure if I'm 100% correct about this. We will see as we move forward. But Semmelweis had a excuse me, had a team around her that was for a very long time either the best team in the entire game, or it sometimes moved to rank 2, then got buffed up to rank 1 again, and there you go, it was always a top team. So Semmelweis as a free character, absolutely crushing us. Look fast forward where Semmelweis is right now. Where is she? In the best, by far best team in the entire game as the sub DPS. You know what I mean? So here is where you see, like it is in every single gacha game, you don't have to even be smart or a genius to figure this out, how important an anniversary is. And there's more, because we got a mode here introduced that could have changed the game and like elevated this game to a whole new sphere, to a whole new universe. They could have made this game one of the best games of all time if they just would have gotten this game mode right at the time, okay? Because the only problem, pretty much, that this game had was the massive, constant content drought. And we got introduced here to the gameplay mode, a series of tasks. Now this, yeah, I know, this sentence didn't age well, I know, but we're talking about when it was introduced at the first anniversary, and it could have been an absolute game changer and elevate this game to new heights, because as I said, the content drought could have been eliminated by this, yeah, let me call it roguelike mode, where you go through the stages, you obtain items, every run could have been something different, could have been unique, there could have been a lot of item builds and different strategies with like all the items and the catalysts and all that stuff. It could have been so absolutely fantastically game changing, but unfortunately they didn't quite nail it even at release. At release it was a fantastic mode, it was pretty good, but it, like the potential, they didn't fulfill this potential at all, right? It didn't change the game, unfortunately. And then they kept developing this, a series of this gameplay mode, and made it worse and worse and worse and worse, and today it's an unplayable garbage bum collector, whatever you want to call it. It's unplayable, and it is really sad. And one of the big reasons why, again, the game state nowadays is like the worst that it has ever been, and them dropping the ball with a series of tasks is a huge reason for this, because we don't have any content drought. But it gets worse because they also destroyed the endgame content that we had with this Limbo and the UTTU. Nowadays we don't even have endgame content anymore, so the game gets worse. But all things considered, it was an absolutely fantastic first anniversary. Okay, then moving on to version 2.0. Here we get the characters Jay, Mercuria and Pioneer. And this is the very first time where I scratched my head and was like, huh? You know? Because what in the world is Pioneer? The 5-star characters were always like decent. At least they had a spot. You could clearly see the purpose of why this 5-star character like should exist and is good to have in the game. But Pioneer, bro, that is mind-blowing. But anyways, that's not the point. So as it is, right, the versions right before the anniversary are bait, and the version after an anniversary has a pretty good character there as well, because just as it is with the second anniversary, right? We are in the second anniversary. The version before with the Assassin's Creed collaboration was a huge bait. Then everyone will spend all of their resources and probably some money because they got baited in the second anniversary, and then they will go broke into the next version. Obviously, they have spent money and all of their resources are used up by now. That's why they hit you with another pretty good character that is not a must-have, not necessarily a must-pull, but very, very, very good regardless. Like it is right now with Sentinel and Sharon, it will be that case. They are very, very good characters, but yeah, even Sharon is now a must-pull, but yeah. Here in this version 2.0, Jay is garbage, we all know about that, must skip. But Mercuria is actually very, very good, because she is, to this day even, very unique in her ability to consistently and easily buff all of your team's critical hit rate. And buffing critical hit rate is the best buff you can possibly have in this game. No character profits more from having anything else increased other than crit rate. Crit rate is the most beneficial thing, the best buff in the game, and Mercuria does this. She even has a pretty good ultimate with ranks up incantations and stuff, so Mercuria is a very, very, very good character. Although, you know, even at the time, right now as well, like where do you play Mercuria? You can play her in rank up. Okay, not many people have this rank up team to begin with, and she only takes the spot in Dynamo for the time being. Next version she's out, right? So you still don't really need Mercuria nowadays, but regardless, she's still very, very good, you know, and that's the whole point with Mercuria. And therefore, you could make an argument pulling for her because she's good, but she is, even at the time, not needed. The support slots in your two teams are filled by the character 6 and by Kakania now. So what's the purpose of pulling for Mercuria? There really is no. You know, I wouldn't blame you if you would pull for Mercuria, but you don't need to. It was honestly a skip. But yeah, I could see why people and how people actually pull for the character. And that's it for the version 2.0. So let's move on. Moving into version 2.1, and remember that the game is not developing. That's why I'm not mentioning anything. We have UTTU and Limbo as the endgame content. We have Main's Bulletin as returning content. We still get something unique to the version, with like an event that we have never seen before. And we get the new characters, right? The game is good as it is. It doesn't need anything other than content, which they attempted to fix with a series of tasks. Unfortunately, it didn't work, right? But the game is good. How it is, it has a rewarding endgame, it has very good new characters every time, it has good gameplay modes, it has variety, it has everything that it needs, basically. So that's why I'm not mentioning anything, because there is nothing, right? If there is something like a series of tasks, I'm of course mentioning it. But here we have UTTU, we have our character story, the main story, a unique event attached to it, and so on and so forth. So the characters are really the only thing that we can talk about here. And those are, in this version, Argus, Tuesday, and Barbara. Now, those characters are again skips, right? I mean, Barbara is a good 5-star. I think she was free. And then Argus is a must skip. Now, Tuesday is where it gets really, really interesting. Because at the time, of course, we have the luxury as to looking into the future. So we know how good Tuesday will be and how important Tuesday will be and how important she is, even to this day, because of her unique ability that she makes poison crit. If we wouldn't have been able to look into the future though, then Tuesday would have been kind of whatever, honestly, because the poison team is very, very mediocre. You have Jessica, you have Kanjira, you have Sotheby, right? There's nothing really that would stick out and make poison viable. Even if we have Tuesday, who now makes poison crit, but you know, being able to look in the future was cheating, and whoever wanted to play poison, for them Tuesday was a must pull. If you don't like the poison archetype, if you don't want to play poison, then yeah, Tuesday is completely irrelevant, and this is a version where you just skip the characters, right? But if you are like, oh, poison is great, I love Sotheby, I love Jessica, I know the future is gonna look very good for the poison archetype, so I'm gonna go in here and pull for Tuesday. Sure, Tuesday is a fantastic character, I love her, she's relevant, she makes poison be viable and respected in the meta, so that's really it, right? The other two characters, yeah, Barbara you don't need to pull for, Tuesday you can if you want to play poison, Argus is a must skip, doesn't really shape the meta or anything, right? The meta right now is you play Lucy with a support and with a healer, like Kakania is the support, Six is the support, we have the healers with either Via or you use Genisei or like whatever you have, Sotheby, right? And you know how this goes, like team building is not really a thing. You could of course there's more, right? You could also build a team with Gio and 37 together with a sustain and you know that kind of jazz. But even to this day, even after the very first anniversary, true team building is not here yet. It hasn't arrived. You look at characters individually, see how strong they are, and then you slap them together with other characters that are very, very good, and you have to, or the only thing you have to really watch out for are the roles, like who's the big main DPS, which are Lucy and Winsong at the time, if you like wanna play the most efficient stuff possible. And you just see then, hey, who are the best supports? That's Kakania 6, you use them. Who are the best healer? That's 2 Fairy, right? And you're just gonna play these characters together, and that's gonna be about it. Team building we have to worry about later in the future. Unfortunately, the version 2.2, this is where the reflections end. So from this point onwards, we have to look at the wiki, unfortunately. But you can see in version 2.2, we have Anionala, Lopera, Mr. Duncan, and White Room released. Here, the last 2 versions were versions where you can really easily skip the characters as nothing was needed. But here, Anionala is an absolute must pull. That was, yeah, like top 3 main DPS. Lucy is of course the best. And then it's a battle between who's better, Winsong or Anionala. And here, this is the very first little tiny baby step into team building, like except for poison, right? Poison was already a thing. Everything else when it came to team building was, yeah, you can mid-max your lineup a little bit, but it's more called a lineup than a team, right? But here, the follow-up team comes a little bit to fruition. Like I said, the first 2, like the first few baby steps are made. We have Gio, we have 37, and now Anionala comes into play. All of these characters are very, very good and synergize around follow-up attacks. So yeah, you can definitely make something work there. Then low para is very good at supporting ultimate archetype teams, as we know by now, which is then Windsong, you know. And so yeah, that's really about it. Here we get for the first time the event Photo Taxes and Study, which I like to call the Moth event. But that's really about it, you know. It's about, here is about pulling for Anionala, and our lineup is now starting to get big. But that's about it for version 2.2 if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, let's move on to version 2.3. Okay, looking at version 2.3. I'm not sure if this was the version where the Reveries in the Rain were introduced, or if this was the version where we got to know of Reveries in the Rain for the future from the Chinese server. It's one of those two things. Either way, this is really where the game starts really to drastically go downhill. I've talked about why Reveries in the Rain could have been really good and exactly what the game needs, because we need endgame content and more content in general. It could have been what the Reveries could have been, but it didn't turn out that way. I talked about this a whole bunch, multiple times, right? So let me make it short. Why do the Reveries in the Rain suck? That is because that is not endgame content. It is completely irrelevant because there is no reward that we would need. It is a just for fun thing where if you want to have a tiny little bit of a challenge, then you could like do it for the fun of it, but you don't need to do it, as the Voyages of Volatility exist and they give you the resources that you need. They give you the keys to upgrade your Euphoria updates, and that is what it is all about. And guess what? In the Voyages of Volatility you need 2 teams. If you have 2 strong enough teams, you can get your hands onto all of the rewards and all of the keys, and that is our true endgame content. The dive that most people mistake as the endgame content is just for fun gimmick. If you want to do it because you have no other content, you want to do something, you want to test yourself a little bit, then you can go ahead and do this for fun. It doesn't reward you, it doesn't do anything for you, and it's completely useless, okay? And there's even stages that are not content, it is cheesable. You have to like cheese your way through the content instead of actually coming up with strategies. Also, aside from the you cheese this thing with like CCing the enemy to death with a cycle, you are gated by you have to have specific teams. Right now the impromptu lineup is a very good example. In the past it was the poison lineup, and if you don't have these teams for very specific stages, then you will suffer a headache there, and it will become even very annoying and not fun to do at all. Of course, if you try a little bit, and yeah, you will find a way getting through these stages at some point, right? Anyways, even if you don't have the teams, but you know, fun is honestly something else. I could go on and on how even nowadays stages are even more cheesable than they were in the past, because now we can choose a fully updated Euphoria update 5-star like P5 character for free, you know. For example, the stage in the 350 meter dive, I think it was, there's a stage where you face Getian, and it can be quite a headache. You will get through it with Regulata and stuff, but it can be quite a headache. But if you just rent yourself, at the time where GU got a Euphoria update, you could rent her, have a P5 GU completely obliterate Getian like it was nothing, you know? And that's what I mean with, and that is another way to like cheese yourself through these stages that don't give you any reward, you know, and that's why this game mode absolutely sucks and is completely garbage and useless. The true endgame are the Voyages of Volatility. This is where you get the true rewards. So now let's talk about version 2.3 and the characters that it introduced. We got Willow, Flutterpage and Brimley. Damn, very, very good characters. And here we do additional steps into actual team building. Willow is the character that makes the poison lineup complete, and Flutterpage is what kind of makes the follow-up team complete. You can now play Flutterpage with 37 and GU, super good team there. The problem that follow-up has for now is it doesn't really have a healer that fits the team yet, while the poison team is truly complete. But yeah, the follow-up team will only need a healer, and then it is even a little bit bloated and you have multiple different options who you use as your main and sub DPS and so on and so forth. But more onto that when the last character for this team actually releases. And then we have Brimley, who's a very, very good 5-star character to begin with. And that's really about it. At least here we still have the UTTU. The UTTU is our a huge part of this game, one of the most important parts of this game, and they will take it away from us to replace it with this useless garbage reveries. Oh, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, and this is why I'm not sure if this is truly the version where the reveries got introduced, or we just got wind of it from the Chinese server. But yeah, this is where the game truly starts to go downhill, especially moving forward, knowing now that they will take UTTU away from us. So there you go, we can now move on. Then version 2.4 is a breakpoint. Version 2.4 is really important to talk about because now this is the beginning of them taking away UTTU from us. We lose a very huge and very important part of the game. It's now just gone, okay? Of course, I forgot to mention that we got Euphoria updates. That is of course very, very important, as characters would otherwise be left behind in the dirt and become completely irrelevant, and the game would introduce his weight. The game would continue to increase his dead weight. We would get more and more characters that are completely irrelevant, useless and just gathering dust. So them introducing Euphoria updates is of course something fantastic and what we absolutely need. And right now, since Euphoria updates, they keep coming, and we get new characters with Baccarola and Fatutu. This is the beginning of us stopping to look at characters individually and focusing upon team building. Fatutu is the last character that the follow-up attack team needed to become complete. You can now choose your main DPS. You can play them with Anulala, with 37, with Geo, right? You put Flutterpage and Fatutu in combination with those characters, and you have a true team on your hands right there. Then also, Fatutu is of course the best sustain up to this day. It's one of the best characters in the game to this day. You can also use Fatutu in the HP loss team with Semmelweis, Euphoria for Eternity, to make Semmelweis gather her stacks more faster and more consistent, and this elevates the HP loss team back to the top of the meta, right? It makes it the best team in the game one more time, right? It's a thing for quite a while. Then we have Baccarola, which introduces to us a whole new archetype, and this is where we truly understand right now that if we look at a character individually, the character is unplayable garbage. So we have to look at characters from now on as part of a team. So Baccarola, if you would pull for Baccarola, that would not be a investment that would help you right now, but it is a very, very important investment regardless to be future proof, as this will be a whole new archetype and you will have to from now on pull for every single character that releases, and that synergizes around the archetype impromptu, which Baccarola is all around. And now if you look at Baccarola individually, you will come to realize that this is a very, very mediocre character and you should not pull for her. And this is where you go absolutely wrong, because you have no idea how good Baccarola would be, as you don't know what other characters you will pair with her and how the synergy with the other characters and Baccarola will turn out to be. And fast forward to now, we all know what an incredible team the impromptu lineup is, you know? And this is a step that most players never do. They did never realize that, and they still, of course, like for many other reasons as well, judge characters wrong. But mainly, the core reason is that they judge characters individually, only based on like the big numbers that they see. They are not even able to judge the numbers correctly because they don't do math. They see big number, they think, whoa, right? And yeah, I mean, talked about this a lot already, so let's keep it at that. But yeah, we lack UTTO. We got a whole new shitty endgame content that is now no longer rewarding anymore, and that is, to me personally at least, an absolute detriment and makes the game much worse. A non-rewarding endgame content is terrible. But enough about that, let's move on to version 2.5. And that is our 1.5 anniversary, actually. Yeah, we of course know how this goes. We got Liang Yue, Noir and Loggerhead. Now, thanks to us being able to look into the future, and we know that next version we get the character Recoleta, we know that Noir is not gonna be it, and this version is a complete skip. By the way, just from version 2.4 onwards, you should already be aware that you will have to save up for the second anniversary. If you don't, you will be left behind and you will have to spend money if you don't do that. So this is the very first step at the latest, right? You can also already have made the decision to skip Baccarola last patch. That means you skip the entire impromptu lineup, and that will save you resources moving into the second anniversary. That is, for example, a decision that I made, and I'm very glad I made that decision. And here at the 1.5 anniversary, we have also characters that we know we can just skip. Liang Yue is a very underwhelming character for the follow-up attack lineup. We know that team is already more than full. So in order for us to pull for a character like Liang Yue would have been in need to be extremely good, because the characters that we already use for the follow-up attack for a full team are also pretty good. And we are, with Liang Yue being mediocre, that's a must skip right then and there. Noir, we know that the ultimate archetype team is slowly building. We to this day don't have a fucking healer. I don't know what these developers are thinking with that, but that's the case. We couldn't know that at the time. So what we know is that Noir is also a must skip, because next version we get Recoleta and she outclasses Noir by quite a huge margin. Then Loggerhead, that is not a free 5-star. Loggerhead is bound to the banner of Liang Yue for some reason, so yeah, no one should have obtained her then either. So again, we have a must skip version on our hands here. And yeah, there's really nothing to say about it other than, yeah, of course, we got the event When the Alarm Sounds, we got the Quitter Crash event, which is one of the best events of all time, which is a rerun right now, and it's an absolute blast to play this thing. So there we go. right? That's about it for the 1.5 anniversary. We got a lot of goodies. We got, the characters are pretty cool. The character stories here are very good. So all things considered, I would still call the 1.5 anniversary a success, even though there was not a character that stands out as, oh, I have to get this thing, right? Just like it was with Gio, or like it was with Kakani and Lucy. But I mean, not every single 1.5 anniversary has to have this must pull character. It is fine. Only true anniversaries, like the first or the second anniversary, of course, they have to have must pull characters, and they have to be exciting, and they can only be exciting if they are completely busted. So there you go for version 2.5. That was not an issue to me. I love this version, and that's about it. Let's move on. Here we have it. That is version 2.6. We have a must pull character with Recoleta, because that is the #1 best main DPS in the game when it comes to the ultimate archetype team. We now know we have to build teams, and the main DPS is the most important character of a team, so Recoleta is considered a must pull. Then Aleph is a very special case, and there was a whole lot of drama evolving around this character and if you should pull him or not. There are multiple reasons, two in fact, big reasons. First of all, if you pull for Aleph, you would have also already needed to pull for Baccarola. That was a must. That is the requirement. If you didn't pull for Baccarola, then Aleph is completely irrelevant to you. People didn't want to believe it. They overestimated this +1 HP garbage nonsense thing in their brain, and tried to come up with arguments of how to that you can play Aleph actually outside of the impromptu lineup, which is of course again a huge shit I took on their head, and I'm proven to be 100% correct with my take. No one in the world plays Aleph outside of the impromptu lineup ever, right? There's not a single soul in the world that ever does that. Many people pulled for Aleph even though they didn't pull for Baccarola. They made a huge mistake, and especially because we, as you know by now, we can look into the future. We can see that we next version get Kiparina, and Kiparina is the true must pull character for the impromptu lineup. That is what defines the team. That is what makes the team as good and as relevant in the meta as it is, not Aleph. So that is another very, very huge issue that we got when it came to Aleph in the past. And yeah, that's about it. So let's move on to version 2.7. Here we are, version 2.7. Here is the aforementioned character Kiparina, and again, if you pulled for Baccarola, you would of course also have needed to have the Euphoria update unlocked for Voyager, and then Kiparina is an absolute must pull. If you don't play the impromptu lineup, then you could still pull for Kiparina, but only in this very specific case that shouldn't be the case for you. And you would need another very, very strong, like overall sustained character to keep your team alive. But she was mostly a skip, especially because at the time that version 2.7 released, we thought we're gonna get the second anniversary right after this version. That was another very huge incentive to actually skip Skiparina, as we called her. Then yeah, Hisabeth, nothing worth talking about. That was a must skip. That was clear, and no one in the world pulled for Hisabeth. Then we got a new 5-star character, Name Day, who doesn't matter because he was part of the Hisabeth banner who no one pulled for. So yeah, I mean, Name Day is a good character, but yeah, I mean, no one has him, so he's pretty irrelevant. And that's really all about to say. Oh yeah, we have a mode called Puppet Arena, which was completely trash in the past, but in this version the Puppet Arena got some very good updates, and I actually enjoyed my time in this Puppet Arena. And yeah, following this version, we unfortunately moved into the Assassin's Creed collaboration. That was the worst thing that ever happened to Reverse1999. Yes, it was even worse than going to school with Jessica, by the way, because it introduced like a whole new, not only did it introduce a whole new community to this game with these Ubisoft fanboys, which are, by the way, really extremely insanely toxic. It was all about fanboying over Ezio, not understanding, not looking at the character at all, not judging the character well, and it was just a whole bunch of toxicity. It was impossible to like talk negatively about the character, which was absolutely needed and 100% the truth, which I'm 100% proven to be correct about. He's irrelevant. He's not part of the best like 5 teams in the game. He's in this niche poison team which fall off of a cliff, and he's already completely irrelevant. It's about Dynamo, Ballatite, and if you want Impromptu, and everything else is pretty meh. And if you wasted your resources to like even P5 such a nonsensical garbage shit character, then you had to spend money in the second anniversary, and I hope and pray it was actually a lot. Then let's move on to the actual second anniversary, which of course introduced us to the by far best character in the entire game, which is Nautica. This is an absolute must pull. Talked about the second anniversary a whole bunch, so I will just call it here. You know everything about this version if you watched my channel in the deepest detail that no one else provided other than me. And that's about it, guys. I hope this video was fun and informative. By the way, I did not talk too much about power creep, because like true team building is not a thing for a very, very long time by now. It's just for a few versions basically that we truly have to build like real teams, you know? And power creeps were very, very slight, and they were fixed like really, really fast by Euphoria updates. So yeah, of course power creep exists, you know, the best main DPSs, they change from Eternity to like, what was it? I forgot what it was, but in the end it was Windsong, and then we moved into Lucy, and then the poison team around Willow, right? Power creep of course does exist. It has to exist, right? New characters that will be introduced, they have to be better than characters from the past. Otherwise, no one would pull for these characters, and nothing would ever be hype if there would never be a character that comes out and that is broken, right? It is just part of the fun, honestly. And Reverse1999 handles this thing, this fact, like extremely well, like pretty much no other gacha game on the market does, right? So it deserves a lot of credit. There are so many characters here that are just like complete skips, like all the time. Every other version we get a complete version of skip, and we can save up. We have no weapon banner, we have a 50-50 PD at 70, we can 100% the character guaranteed if we just have a tiny little bit of discipline. So we don't necessarily need dupes, right? There are just specific cases like Jiu, for example. Liang Yue needs portraits. You always want portraits on the anniversary main DPS characters, needless to explain. But overall, you don't even really need dupes in this game. So I mean, this is one of, if not even the best gacha game on the entire of all time. Even I can go as far and say that. So yeah, even though the game has massive issues right now, like no endgame content whatsoever, the Voyages of Volatility are a complete joke, especially right now in the second anniversary. Like, you only still need 2 teams in this game to beat the endgame, the true endgame content, which is not the dive, by the way. I explained that earlier in detail. So, and we have now Bloodtide and Dynamo. That is completely trivialized, right? I mean, we have no challenge in this game. We have no incentive to really play. There is no goal to accomplish in this game that would be rewarding. In the past, we had that with the Limbo, right? We needed 2 teams. We had to be strong enough to beat the Limbo every time on reset in order to not be left behind, because we need the resources there, to the rewards that the Limbo gives us, to be able to pull for characters in the future, right? So that is a true incentive. Why would you clear the dive? There's no need. All it does, it gives you a few keys here and there, not even many, and you obtain way more by clearing the voyages. Way more keys than enough by just clearing the voyages. So that's about it. Even though this game has a lot of issues and is developed into a very, very bad direction, especially now that we know we will get collaborations and everything will be catered towards just new players, it is still one of the better gacha games out there. And that's about it for Reverse1999. That video was already long enough. I think I talked way too much, but yeah, I wanted to get that out of there. So that's it for the video, guys. If you like Reverse1999 content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, don't forget to join the Discord server. Link to that in the description down below. Take care of yourselves, have a great day, and we still love this game.